Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to talk now about the harvesting of hazelnuts. Most hazelnuts are shrubs, multi-stem shrubs, although in commercial orchards they're sometimes grown as single-trunked trees. That's to facilitate machine harvesting of the nuts, waiting till the nuts drop. But for the purposes of small-scale growers, homeowners and such, hazelnuts probably need to be harvested by hand, possibly stripped from the trees on the day they're ripe. Because if you have squirrels or blue jays, Steller's jays or scrub jays in your area, they're likely to take them way before they drop. Hazelnuts are generally ripe about a month before they'll drop from the plants, and so the way that I gauge the ripeness of a hazelnut is whether or not the shell will readily separate from the husk, such as this one here. So the nut is still a little green looking, but if I can pry it or separate it easily from the husk, then that's a sure indication that it's ripe inside, and it will continue to turn brown as it dries. So that's what I look for, regardless of the species. If I can separate it from the husk, I know that it's internally ripe, and it's viable, it'll sprout, and it'll taste good, and it'll be filled inside. So hazelnuts do a lot of their ripening in the last several weeks prior to harvest, you know, the jays and the squirrels, if they go into them before they're filled inside, there's really not much there, and because the husk and the shell develop before there's any kernel inside for them to eat. The kernel develops last. And in the case of the cultivated name varieties of hazelnuts here in western Washington, ripening time for them, depending on the variety and the year somewhat, it depends on some varieties early ripening as early as mid-August, some varieties late August, and some varieties into the first week or so, few days of September, more or less. And that's here in cool western Washington conditions. So because hazelnuts are very flexible stems, one can grab a branch and just pull I can pull a 20-foot tree down to me and just harvest the clusters of nuts right off the branches. Now, since it's mid-September, this has been harvested already, but you can see the catkins, which are the male flowers, already starting to develop. In the case of hazelnuts here in western Washington, they never really go completely dormant throughout the year. They actually flower in the wintertime. And so this particular variety will be flowering probably in late January. But the flowers themselves, in a colder area, it might be March. But the flowers themselves, when in full bloom, are hardy to about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. When they're dormant like this, they could take 20 or 30 below 0 Fahrenheit. So they're pretty tough plants. But so the criteria that we look for in harvesting is separation from the husks, and that is a sure indication of ripeness. And we have many different varieties of hazelnuts that we grow. Some of them we have ornamental hazelnuts. The red-leafed hazels also will have a red husk, and in some cases, even the nut itself is red, such as with this variety, until when it's in the tree, it's still red. And other varieties are smaller, but multiple nuts in a cluster, and even though they're green looking, you know, if you can separate them out from the husk, they're internally as ripe as they are going to get, and they will turn brown naturally as you dry them. So, but certainly once you harvest the nuts, they should be dried so that they will keep well in the shell for a year, then at room temperature or longer.